Today, I am going to be beginning a series of talks on the wheel of life. And so to begin with here, I'm going to bring up a picture of it briefly. Let me see here. Okay, there is a picture of it. And the reason why I chose this picture is that there are a lot of elements in this picture, and it is frequently painted on the outside wall next to the main entrance of a Tibetan monastery. It is not anywhere that I have found at the KTD Gompa, but for instance, in Bodh Gaya, there is the Monlam Pavilion, and then next to it is the Tergar Monastery, which is Mingyur Rinpoche's monastery, and it is painted on an outside wall right by the main entrance, and it is painted in a place where the rain would not fall. There is I guess the entryway is set in a little bit so that the second floor forms a little bit of a roof over the painting so it doesn't face the elements. So this is what I am going to talk about for a number of talks, because it covers a lot of territory and explains kind of the central tenets of Buddhism. And so it, I guess the first thing to go over are the different elements of it. So to go back to that painting here, I'm going to point out some things here. If you can see my cursor in the center, and let's see if I can enlarge this. In the center, we have a snake, a pig, and a rooster. And they represent the three main afflictions of the pig being ignorance, the snake being aversion and aggression, and the rooster being desire and passion. And then this donut here around it, there are two halves, a black half and a kind of a blue and gold half. This represents karma. And what you have here are two demons that are dragging. You can see they're tied up by their wrists, in this case, a total of 6 beings in human form to the lower realms. And on this side, you have beings that are going upward. And in fact, you have here the start of a path that goes up to a pure realm. So this represents the effect of karma based on these 3 afflictions. Then the next circle here are the 6 realms. And so you have down here a depiction of the hell realm. Let's see if I can zoom in on it. So here you have the depiction of the hell realms. You can see here is a pot that is being boiled with beings in it. There are beings being tortured, cut up, strung out, all kinds of different hells here. And I won't go into all of them now. Over here are the cold hells, which are frozen and icy. The next realm then is the hungry ghost realm, or the Preta realm. And you can see here these various beings in the Preta realm. They have very large bellies. The land is desolate. There isn't much to eat. There isn't any pleasure there. They are starving from hunger and thirst. And on the other hand, if you look here, there is a bodhisattva, and from him is springing water where these Preta beings are actually able to drink. In some of the aspiration prayers, they talk about that may the beings that are dying of thirst in the Preta realm be given drink by the bodhisattvas. Now, going back to the hell realm, here is a bodhisattva in the hell realm that in this case, it looks like he is pointing up to the higher realms and the pure realm and giving a teaching. The point being that in each of these realms in samsara, there are bodhisattvas that are leading beings out. Over here on the other side is the animal realm. So elephant, camel, yaks, horses, all kinds of animals, plus some that are dwelling in water. Some of these would be nagas. And again, there is a bodhisattva in this painting that is there to lead animals out. Now, going back to the other side, here we have the human realm. And since this is painted in the Tibetan style, you have a tent here with prayer flags in it. You hear a herd of yaks, someone plowing a field. You have a gompa shrine and so forth. And here again is a bodhisattva. And this looks like a lama giving teachings. Then we have up here is the top God realm. And over here is the jealous God realm. And so in this picture, you have soldiers or warriors here with bows and arrows that are pointed up, and they are fighting with the full gods who are above them in this realm up here, because the jealous gods are jealous of the full gods and are continually fighting and quarreling with the full gods. The problem is that the full gods are more powerful, and the jealous gods are always defeated in the long run. Now, to emphasize how jealousy works, There is a tree here that is rooted in the jealous God realm, and it bears fruit that is absolutely divine and has incredibly fragrant, beautiful flowers. But it only does that in the full God realm. So the jealous gods only see the trunk, but they know what is up there in the full God realm. And so there is usually in this painting a picture of a jealous God with an axe that is chopping the tree down, with the idea of, if I can't enjoy it, nobody can. And again, there is a bodhisattva here in the jealous God realm, leading beings out. And then here in the full God realm, you've got another bodhisattva leading beings in that realm out. So that is the next circle. So it is karma that causes rebirth in these various realms. And so this is where your karma takes you. And then around that is this circle. Again, it's like the rim of a wheel. It kind of encloses everything. And it is the 12 links of interdependence, or the 12 nidanas. And then the whole wheel is held by Yama, the Lord of Death. And he looks incredibly ferocious, but actually he is an enlightened being, and his nature is compassion and wisdom. But to beings in samsara, death, of course, is frightening and fearful. Now, as I said, from the second circle, which represents karma, there is the beginning of the path. So let me zero in on it. And so here is the path. You can see it goes up here. Let's scroll down a little bit. Goes up here, comes around here, goes up there. Here it gets a little wider, and you can actually see beings on it at this point. And it goes up to a Buddha and a Pure Land. And then over here, you have a bodhisattva pointing to that Pure Land. This is the way. Now, these paintings of the Wheel of Life can have a lot of different, slight differences in them. The Dalai Lama says that he has a painting where, instead of Yama, the Lord of Death, that's holding the wheel, it's a skeleton. The point being the same, and that is that death is our, you might say, the destination of beings in the 6 realms. So I'm going to get back to me. So I have a quote here. This is from the aspiration prayer from the Bodhicharya Avatara by Shantideva. And Actually, this one is from the King of Aspiration prayers that we do in Yongne, and it gives you an idea of how vast the realms of samsara are. So in a single atom, there are realms as numerous as all atoms. In those realms reside infinite Buddhas in the midst of bodhisattvas. Beholding them, may I perform awakened conduct like that in all directions. On the breadth of just a hair, there are oceans of Buddhas, as many as in the three times, and oceans of realms. May I act and be engaged with them for oceans of kalpas. So this is the aspiration that even though there are oceans of realms, and they have been in existence since the beginningless beginning. And when I say existence, I mean relative reality, not ultimate reality, because ultimate reality is beyond time. But this is the Bodhisattva motivation, and I think it's good to begin this teaching with that, may we, all of us, be engaged with all the Buddhas of the three times and the 10 directions. You could say that this painting is about the meaning of life. And in fact, this is the title of a book by the Dalai Lama, which I am using for this teaching, but I'm getting this teaching from other sources as well. But this painting teaches what is meaningful in life and what is not, what causes suffering, what causes happiness, how to gain control of the direction of our lives, and the difference between long-term happiness and short-term happiness. So here is a definition that I found for samsara. And this comes from a book of Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche's. It's Karma Chagme's Mountain Dharma, and it's in volume 4. And in there, he defines samsara as, quote, cyclic existence in which ordinary beings compulsively take rebirth endlessly in the 6 realms, thereby experiencing endless suffering. And so the point being that there is no, you might say, safe refuge in any of the realms of samsara. And I'll go into the 6 realms in a future talk in more detail. But the point being that conditioned existence, relative existence, necessarily has suffering in it. It is unavoidable. And no matter how much you try, there is suffering. I actually just watched a talk that Khenpo Ujin gave yesterday evening at KTD on the 4 ends, which is birth ends in death, meetings end in parting, whatever rises falls. and all accumulation ends in dispersion. This is the nature of samsara. Here is a quote from the Dalai Lama in his book. Our worldly priorities can be ironic. We place first what we think we want most, then we discover that our wanting is insatiable. Paying off the house, writing the book, making the business successful, setting up retirement, taking the big trip, things that are temporary on the top of our list of priorities, completely consume our time and energy. And then at the end of the life, we look back and wonder what all those things meant. So the source of this painting comes from the Buddha. He actually had a painter paint it, and he described what he wanted in the painting. I do not have a clue what that original painting looked like, but the painting that I have been showing is done in the Tibetan tradition, and this is very standard in Tibetan Buddhism. But again, getting back to the central message of it, it is that selfishness leads to imprisonment, and altruism leads to liberation from suffering. And imprisonment it's an interesting word because frequently words that are used to describe that are addiction, that we are addicted to desire and objects of desire. We are addicted to being angry and frustrated and upset, and so on down the line. We are addicted to ignorance, just plain not knowing. We don't even know that we are uh, suffering from illusion and delusion. We think that our addiction to desire is normal and that there's nothing wrong with it. And the same thing with anger, jealousy, pride, and so on and so forth. And so on and on it goes. And we take a rebirth after rebirth after rebirth. So to get to the specifics of that central hub, the pig is fundamental ignorance, not knowing the true nature of existence. And it's not just an inability to know the truth, but an active misapprehension of the truth. That it is actively projecting a dualistic perspective on phenomena, seeing things as self and other. Here is a quote from Khenpo Karthar Rinpoche. That which is ignorant is the mind of an individual who takes that which is not a self to be a self, and that which is merely experience to be inherently existent as other than experience. So very simply, what we experience is no more than experience. it has no existence outside of being an experience. And this is what is meant by the unity of appearance and emptiness. It is appearance. We experience it, but that's all that it is. It is empty of solidity. It is empty of being independent from the person that experienced it. And so this active aspect of ignorance, this projecting of things onto our experience, it has the element of self, that we separate our own self from the self of others, both in other beings and in outer phenomena. Secondly, we look at the self of our own as being inherent, and that is that it is not coming from somewhere outside of ourselves, that is somehow or another internal. And if we look at it, we have all kinds of ideas, concepts, even theories that are felt to be inherent, permanent, and independent. But on closer analysis, turn out to be interdependent, related to our experience, and related to, because of our projecting, thinking things that are solid. We come into the world without even a name. Our parents give us a name, but it doesn't take us long. And pretty soon, we are that name that was given us. Now, another aspect of this ignorance is the idea of a permanent self. That somehow or another it is, there is an element of permanence, even if it changes subtly, but underneath all of the change is something that is permanent. And when change happens, we suffer. It's not fair or whatever. We see this self in our confusion as being independent, that it is not affected by others. And finally, we see or assume that some things will bring lasting happiness, and we chase after them. And when they don't, then we chase after something else. Or, as they say in business, if it's not working, do more of it. If having $50,000 doesn't bring happiness, then, well, let's see if we can have happiness with 100,000. And if we don't have happiness when we reach 100,000, then let's go for 1,000,000, and on and on and on and on and on. So this is how we generate samsara and its pain. Now, on the other hand, since the ignorance is in our mind, We don't have to change anything besides our mind to be liberated, to free ourselves from samsara and free ourselves from the suffering of samsara. Nothing real has to be removed or eliminated. Nothing solid needs to be removed or eliminated. Our minds are workable. I like the phrase, I need to reinvent myself. And I think a lot of people have been thinking that this year because of the COVID and the economic downturn and self-isolating and so forth. Well, quite honestly, that phrase means that you are already saying that you are an invention. So the key to liberation is just plain uninvent yourself. So this is the pig. If we look at our minds and try to find the mind, it gets more difficult to find. The harder we look, the more difficult it is to find. And this is an indication of the discrepancy between the way things are and the way we perceive things. And so from this basic fundamental ignorance, and this basic fundamental ignorance is different than denial, you might say lack of education, and sometimes the way we describe ignorance, being like uneducated, just dumb, not knowing, and in denial, and so forth. So from this, then desire develops and aversion arises. And then the third, let's call it, you could call it klesha, is what Trungpa Rinpoche calls as mental dullness. And this is sometimes also called ignorance. But to distinguish between the two, the first one is fundamental ignorance. And this ignorance is more of a dullness, which is on the same level of desire and aversion. Indifference, denial, and so forth would be this dullness. Apathy is another good word for it. So there's a difference between the klesha of ignorance and fundamental ignorance. Frequently, the pig has the snake, this tail of the snake in its mouth, indicating that it is aversion that arises from this fundamental ignorance. And again, sometimes the snake has a rooster's tail, and the rooster has the pig's tail. They are all interconnected, interrelated. So attachment arises from desire, hatred arises from aversion, and all of these symbolize that they feed on each other, operating and generating more confusion, cloudiness, and bewilderment. So all of this is not possible without fundamental ignorance, and that is believing in a separate self. Now, it's interesting here about the human realm, because us humans are very, very conceptual, and much more than animals. And that our minds not only have innate these three emotions as an innate characteristic, but we can acquire them intellectually as we grow up, that we have all kinds of theories, conceptual systems, or just plain too many thoughts. And they continually feed these three main kleshas or poisons of the mind, or mental afflictions, that we can justify so many things intellectually. Now, beings in other realms aren't usually so, you might say, inventive, creative. So this is how a desire works, that an object appears, we apprehend it as being inherently existent, but at first there is no desire. It might not take long for that to develop, but with this apprehension of this appearance that has appeared, then there is a feeling of either this is good or bad. And if it's good, desire arises. Then comes the, you might say, the urge to take possession of it one way or another. Uh, buy the object, or incorporate it. If it's a mental object, you might say incorporate it into our mind stream. And at that point, the whatever it is that arose becomes even more valuable, because now you have taken ownership of it in one way or another. And again, an interesting experience that I had was back in 1987, when my marriage broke up and we were getting towards the date of the divorce, had an auction. And I and my former wife had accumulated a lot of possessions that neither one of us wanted anymore, because if you kept them, they would have to be appraised and half the value would go to the other person. And so we sold a lot of things that I thought were very valuable, and the people at the auction thought were of little value. And it was a real educational experience. It's amazing how much value we place on things, and when it comes to uh, getting rid of them, either at the point of death or, let's say in this case, a divorce, how little value other people place on your precious things. I can't tell you how many boxes of stuff of my parents I took to the Goodwill. Uh, Actually, when they downsized, and then when they actually died. And my sister did the same when they moved from Colorado up to the Twin Cities area. And so all these very valuable possessions that they had accumulated over the years, almost all of them went to the Goodwill. I kept a few things. I gave some things away to friends. But most of it was never, you might say, a monetary value was never placed on it and exchanged. So the last element of this, the way desire operates, is that we join our attachment for pleasant objects with this strengthening of our ego and strengthening of our desire, and it just causes the desire to gain more and more control over us. We become more addicted. The same process works for anger, that we become addicted to anger if that is our main klesha. So there is a logical term that is used in Tibetan Buddhism, which is conventionally valid perception. And this means the way phenomena appear to beings in samsara. This is perceiving things dualistically, as a self that is perceiving something that is external to the self. Another term closely related to this is valid cognition. And this is having the correct knowledge of a particular object, which is that it is just experience.